Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome to Wix Fixer. This video will be an updated real-time API video. I had received some comments from you guys that the previous video was of low quality, and I checked it out, and it was very hard to see, and the end was missing. So I'm making this new updated real-time API video for you, and hopefully this one will be better. So let's get started. Okay, so in order to introduce the real-time API, I have a setup over here, which is going to be a kind of messaging board. It won't be a full-blown, chat app or anything like that, but just a very simple messaging portal. And I'll explain more as we go through the API, but really the goal here is to explain the API and not to build anything too crazy. So in order to get started, we should take a look at our API reference. And you'll see here that for Wix Realtime, we have two sections. One is the front end section, which is called Wix Realtime, and the other is Wix Realtime Backend. And the way that it works is that in the backend, we set up a publish function. And will tell us what happens when we publish something to the channel. And it will help us build a function that we're going to import in the front end and use to publish to the channels. And on the front end, what we need to do is just pretty much subscribe and unsubscribe from channels. There are more things that you can do with Wix Realtime, but this is going to be more of an introduction. And maybe later on, I will make another video which will go a little more in depth for other things such as unconnected, disconnected, and permissions. So in order to get started, let's head over to the boilerplate code for publish. And you can see here that there's two options. One is publish to a channel, and one is to a resource on a channel. So a resource is basically just a sub channel. And if you publish something to a resource that somebody is not subscribed to, but they're subscribed to the channel, they won't get that message. But if they're subscribed to a resource on a channel and you post something to the channel, then they will get it. So just think of it as something that's more general and something that's more specific. And you can choose to use either one depending on your needs in your code. I'm going to start out with just a plain channel, and then later on, I'll introduce using resources. So I'm going to copy the boilerplate code here from publish to a channel, and I'm going to head over to my site and create a new backend module. And I'm going to zoom in here so you can see the code that I'm writing a little better. And I'm going to add a backend module over here, and I'm going to call this one real-time updated. Okay, because this is our updated real-time video. And here inside the web module, I'm just going to erase all of this code that it comes with, and I'm going to paste in the code from the Wix API. So you can see here that we're importing Wix Realtime Backend, and here we have a bunch of things going on, but we want to wrap this in a function that will be able to import into the front end. And I'm just going to call this function send message, because that's basically what we're going to be using real-time for. We're going to be sending instant messages between people. So I'm going to call this send message, and this is going to be equal to a function. And of course, let's not forget to export it. Excellent. And now I'm just going to take this code over here and paste it inside of my function. So let's see what's happening here in this code. So here I declare a variable which is called channel, and this channel has a name, and I'm going to call the name of this channel message board. And you can call it whatever you want. Okay, that's just the name of the channel. And when we're subscribing, we're going to need to pass this name in order to tell it which channel to subscribe to. Then we have the publish function here. And what it does is it publishes a message, which is this. And this message could be a string, or it can be something more complex. It can be an object. And I'm just going to write here for now, hello world, okay, just for testing's sake. Okay, and then after the publish, we can do something else if we decide to. So let's head over to our front end. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subscribe the user to that channel as soon as they land on the page. And in order to do that, I am going to go to the Wix real-time front end part, and I'm going to go here to the subscribe uh, section and copy over this boilerplate code and paste it right here in my front end. Okay, and this makes sure the import has to go on the top level. So I'm going to copy that over. Let's get rid of this so we have a little more room. And I'm going to copy that over to top level here. And then I'm going to create a wrapper function. So I'm going to say const subscribe and spell everything terribly to channel. Okay. And you can call this whatever you want, of course. It's just something that should be descriptive. And now we say, okay, what channel do we want to subscribe to? So that's right over here. And we named our channel message board. Okay, and it's important to change this because otherwise we won't be subscribing to the right channel. And then we don't need this let subscription ID because we don't need our subscription ID for anything at the moment. In the future, if you need it, then you should use that. And I'm going to get rid of it over here and copy this over into my function and format our code. Great. So now whenever this function runs, what will happen is we're going to subscribe to the channel message board. And then there's a callback function which gives us the message that was sent if a message is sent to the channel and the channel information that we subscribe to. Okay, so basically anything that we want to happen when a message is sent to this channel has to be written inside of this callback function. So I'm going to get rid of the channel name because I don't need that right now. And I also don't need this information about the publisher. So I'm going to get rid of that for now. I just want the payload, plain and simple. And what I'm going to do when we receive a message to uh, from this subscription, I'm just going to console.log that message. Sorry, not message, payload. Okay, because the message it's a little confusing, but the message that's returned here is actually includes several things, and the payload itself is that message that we sent using the backend function. Excellent. So I set up the subscription, and let's just not forget to call that function whenever I land on the page. The next thing that I want to do is I actually want to send a message to that channel. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to import the backend function. So I'm going to import send a message. That's what we called it from backend slash real-time updated. And now I can use that function. I'm just going to say send message. Okay, so what's going to happen is as soon as we hit the page, we are going to subscribe to the channel, and then we are going to send a message. And if everything is working, in the console, we should see hello world because that is the message that is sent. Okay, so I'm going to go into preview mode. And now that I'm in preview mode, I see that we did not console send message. That means that something went wrong. So I'm going to go back to the editor. Okay, and then I am going to see what our problem is. So subscribe, and this is what should happen when we have a message. And let's go here to the backend, and let's just console over here message sent. And let's also console up here. Sending message. Okay, so we can try and understand where our code is going wrong. So I'm going to hit preview again. And the advantage of doing preview and not publishing your website here is that Wix lets you see, and this time it worked. Okay, so maybe there was just a little small error with the last time that I did it, but now it worked. And you can see here, as I was saying, the advantage of using the preview in Wix is that it lets you see the back-end functions as well. So I can see the console.log from the real-time updated, whereas if I was looking at my live site, I wouldn't be able to see it, and I would have to check out the logs in my dashboard. Okay, so that's why it's pretty good to use preview mode if you can in these cases. Great, so now we see everything is working, and I don't know why it didn't work the first time, but that's the internet and that's Wix. So I'm going to go back to the editor. And now that we managed to send a simple message, I want to show you how we can take this one level up and send something more custom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the message function. And here I'm going to add a parameter, okay? And instead of sending hello world, I'm going to send this message. Okay, so you're going to see that we're actually going to be sending a message from the front end to whoever is subscribed to that channel. Okay, so I'm going to go back into preview mode. Sorry, before I go back into preview mode, I need to pass the parameter here in send message. So I'm going to say, this is a custom message. Okay, and I'm going to go back into preview mode. And you see here that we got, this is a custom message. Okay, so that's how we can leverage this to send messages on, for example, a message board or notifications or something like that. Okay, so now that we figured out how to send to a channel, let's actually build out our application. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is when the person gets to our messaging board, we are going to ask them to enter their name. Okay, so I'm going to say name, sorry, not const, we're going to let name. Let's call it username, just to make it more clear. And then when they click this button, the start button, then we're going to do a few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set, I'm setting up here an on-click event listener for this button. And when they click the start button, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that username is equal to the value of that input, which I think I called name input. Excellent. That's going to be the value. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this group, which I called, I think, name group dot collapse. And I'm going to expand the input. So I'm going to say input group, not name input, sorry. Maybe it's message group. What did I call it? Let's go over here and see. Send group. Okay, send group. Send group dot expand. Okay, so I'm only going to let them start sending messages once they selected a username. Okay, now we are going to use this input, the sending input, to send messages to the channel that they're on. So we're going to start by using the general channel. Okay, we're not going to talk about sub-channels, and I'm going to talk about that later on. So now we need to set up the event listener for the send message button, which I think I called send button. Section 1, send button. And dot on click. So here, what we want to do is to actually send a message. Okay, so I'm going to take that over here and paste that. And the message that we're going to send is going to be equal to the value of whatever is inside of this message input. So let's first get the value of message input. So let's say const message is equal to message input dot value, and then we are going to send the message. And that would be pretty cool, but let's make it even more cool. Why isn't this? That might be something weird, but we'll check that out soon. Okay, so what I want to do is when I get a new message, I want to display it here in the message text. Okay, and in order to do that, what I need to do is that when this payload comes in, I need to set, instead of consoling it, I need to set the message text dot text to be equal to payload. Okay, so now theoretically, when we send the message, we should see it over here. And I'm going to actually open up two incognito windows for you to see so that it's more clear what's going on here. Okay, so everything looks in order. Let's format that. And let's publish our website. Okay, because we need to use incognito because we need to have two users here. Okay, so I'm going to pause this for 1 second. Okay, so over here I have two incognito windows open to test our messaging board. So first of all, I'm just going to add names for each board. So let's just do Bob and Jane. And now I'm going to start sending messages. So I'm going to say, hi, send. And you can see now that both of our boards have updated and say hi. And how are you? Okay, so this is real-time updating communication between two anonymous users on our website. So we've already done a lot, but we have several issues with our messaging board. And one of the issues is that I'm receiving my own messages, which that might not be something that you want to do. And another problem might be that I don't have the name of the person that's sending the message because there might be several people on this channel and the messages are just coming up and I don't know who's sending them. And the last thing that we can try and fix is that messages will persist. So we'll be able to see a few messages and not just one message at a time. Obviously, one way to do this would be using a collection and saving each message as it's sent. I'm not going to do that. So messages will disappear in between sessions, but at least I'll be able to show people the whole history of the messages for this session. Okay, so let's try and go ahead and fix those things. Okay, so the first thing I want to deal with is to prevent me from seeing my own messages when I send them. So I only want the other user to see when I send them a message and not for me to see my own messages. And the way we're going to do that is by creating a unique ID for each of the users. And since these people are not logged in, they're just random people on the website, I'm just going to use a random number in order to create the user ID. So I'm going to say let user ID equal to math.random, and let's just say times 10,000. That should be good enough. And I'm going to math.floor that. Okay, so that means that each person should have an ID, which is 5 digits long, and it's random. And you can make it more, or you can use some kind of npm package or something like that to calculate your IDs if you want them to be super unique. But for purpose of demonstration, I think that the chances that we'll get two people having the same 5 digits is quite unlikely. So we have a user ID, and now what we're going to do is we're going to send a slightly more complex message through our real-time API. And what we need to do is that when we send a message, instead of just sending the content of the message, we're going to send a few things. Okay, so we're going to send the user ID, we're going to send the message, and we're going to send the name of the person that is sending the message. So let's go over here and let's say message data. Okay, something that's a little more than the message itself. And obviously we need to declare this variable, and that will be equal to, uh, let's say, username, user ID, and message. Okay, so we're sending these three pieces of data, and the way it'll work is that this will be the name of the property, and the value will be whatever's over here. Okay, so that's how this object will work, and we're going to pass this message data here instead of the message. And now we need to hop over to our backend function and change how our backend function works with this new information. Okay, so our backend function receives this message, and I'm just going to change this to message data, okay, just so that it's a little more clear. And actually, we don't have to change much here because we could just send this data back as is and let the front end deal with it. And that is what we're going to do. So I just changed basically the naming here so that it's a little more clear what we're passing through. And if I head back to our front end, here is where we need to make some changes. Okay, so now our payload is actually this message data. So the message text.text, instead of making it equal to the payload, I am going to make it equal to the name of the person, which will be payload dot username. And then let's do, and you could also use a template literal here. I'm just maybe being a little lazy. Plus payload dot message. So now what should happen is that this message text should show us a name and then the message. And I'll add a space here just so that it'll be a little more orderly. And we also need to add a condition here because I don't want to display this message if I am the person that sent it. And the way we can verify that is by adding an if statement here. And we'll say that if payload dot user ID is equal to user ID, then let's return. Okay, so if I'm the person that sent this, don't continue on and execute this part of the function. Okay, so now I'm going to publish this, and we're going to head back over to our incognito windows to test this out. Okay, so we're back here in our incognito windows, and I refreshed them so that we have our newly published website. And now I'm just going to add our names again. That's Bob and Jane. And let's see what happens when we send a message. So I'm going to send a message from Bob. Hi. And you can see here that on Jane's side on the right, it took a little time. But on Jane's side on the right, I have Bob, hi. But here on Bob's side, it still says message because I'm filtering and I'm saying, okay, I only want to display messages that I did not send, that I received. And then let's say Jane says, how are you? And we'll send that over to Bob, and Bob got it. Okay, and he says back, good. Okay, and then our message changed to good. So here we have two-way messaging, but the problem is that I don't remember what happened in the conversation because our message erases each time that we send it. And in order to fix that, I'm going to add a few lines of code. So let's head back to our front end. Okay, so we're back in our front end code. And now what I'm going to do is first I'm going to implement the messaging that persists. And in order to do that, first of all, I'm going to remove our condition that we're only going to send the message if we are not the sender, because I also want to display my own messages in the message log. I only really did that previous step just to demonstrate how you would implement something like that if you chose to. And what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create up here a variable. And let's call this let message log. And what we're going to do is instead of changing the text each time we have a new message, what we're going to do is we're going to add it to our message log. So I'm going to say message log plus equals, sorry, I wrote just message, I didn't write message log. And it equals to this. And we're going to add also a new line. And I always forget which way the dash should go for a new line. So it could be that we'll just have a dash with an end at the end, or we'll actually have a new line. And then our message text.text will be equal to the message log. And to demonstrate this, let's just check it out on our preview mode. Great, so now we are in preview mode and I'm just gonna enter a name, so Bob, and let's start writing messages. So I'm gonna write hi, and for some reason I have undefined Bob, and I'll take a look at that in a moment. Let's see, go back to editor, and that has to do definitely with the change that I just made, and let's see why that's happening. Okay, so payload plus username message.text equals message log. What was undefined before Bob? Okay, so actually this, I'm just going to say is equal to an empty string. Because when I say let message log, that message log was just equal to undefined. And when I added more strings to it, it did not overwrite this message log. It just added that to the word undefined, which is obviously not what we wanted. So I think that that should fix it. And let's head back into preview mode. And Bob is back. And hi. Excellent. And how are you? And then I'm good. And you can see that there's something annoying here that my message stays here in the input. And I'll show you how to fix that as well, even though it's not necessarily something that has to do with real time. But you can see here that we're getting the result that we wanted, that the messages are persisting. And if Jane was sending us messages as well, you would see them, and you'll see that when I demonstrate after the next thing that we're going to add, which is the sub channels or the resources. So I'm going to head back to the editor. And first of all, let's just deal with that little UX issue. So basically, I want my input to clear after I send a message. So right here, after I click the send button and after we send the message, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this input value. I'm going to make that equal to blank. Okay, and that should solve that little UX issue. Next, we're going to talk about resources. Okay, and in order to do that, I set up here two channels that we can kind of access using our real-time API. And we'll just call them channel 1 and channel 2. And so basically, let's set up some event listeners for what happens when we hit one of these buttons. So right over here, after subscribe to channel, I'm going to add these event listeners. So first, let's deal with channel 1. So that's channel 1 dot on click. So what do we want to happen when we subscribe to a channel? So first of all, we're going to want to do a Wix real-time subscribe. And when we pass in our channel, we're going to pass it in with a resource as well. But before we do that, we're actually going to want to unsubscribe. And the reason we want to do that is because if we only subscribe when we click channel 1, for example, then when we go ahead and subscribe to channel 2, we'll be subscribed to channel 1 and channel 2. But that's not the effect we want. We want to be unsubscribed from all channels except for the specific one we're on. Okay, and channels here is resources. I know it's a little confusing. Um, so let's head over to our documentation and take a look at this unsubscribe. Okay, and here there's a demonstration. So this shows us subscribing and unsubscribing. Okay, so here, so this is going to unsubscribe from all subscriptions to the channel. Okay, so that means all okay, so it says here, when you unsubscribe from a channel, you do not unsubscribe from the resources that are on the same channel. Okay, to no longer receive messages on a channel resource, you must explicitly unsubscribe from that specific resource. Okay, so we're going to need to pass in the resource names of what we want to unsubscribe from, as well as the channel. So let's copy over this unsubscribe function here. And I'm going to go to our front end and then channel1.onClick. So we're going to unsubscribe and we need to tell it which channel we're going to unsubscribe from. So let's just say your const channel, okay, is equal to, and this is going to be an object because we're going to have a channel name and a resource here. So the name of the channel is going to be, if you remember, it's message board. And then we need to add the resource. I'm just going to double check how that should be written. So I'm going to go here to subscribe and down here to subscribe to a resource. And then we have here resource ID. Okay, so this is what we need to use. And here it's going to be resource ID. And the resource ID for this one, I'm just going to call it channel 2. Okay, and why did I call it channel 2? Because when we are subscribing to channel 1, I want to unsubscribe from channel 2. Remember, that's what we're doing here. We're unsubscribing, and we're going to do the opposite for channel 2. And then here, instead of passing in some channel, I'm going to pass in channel. Great, so that will unsubscribe us from channel 2 when we click on channel 1. Now what we need to do is actually subscribe to channel 1. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to use this same subscribe that we have over here. So I'm just going to copy that over. And we're going to do that right after we're done unsubscribing. Okay, so we have subscribe, but we are missing this channel. Okay, so let's just call this old channel. Okay, I just want to be more specific. And this is going to be new channel. And you can call these things whatever you want. And you can see here that we haven't defined new channel yet, so we have to define it over here. So let's say const new channel, and again, not spelling everything correctly, equals 2. So I'm just going to copy this over, and message board stays the same, but channel 2 becomes channel 1. So that's what we're subscribing to, and what we want to happen when we send a message to channel 1 is that we want to display the message in the same way that we did before. But let's try and create 2 different logs for each channel so that when we switch between the channels, we'll be displaying different logs. Okay, so here I'm going to say message log, and let's call this one let message log 1. Okay, this will be the message log for channel 1, and we'll have another message log for channel 2. Okay, and then over here, instead of adding not over there, right down here, in channel 1, instead of adding the messages to message log, we will add them to message log 1. And we're going to say that our text should be equal to message log 1. The last thing that we're going to need to do to make this work is to change this text to message log 1 as soon as we change the channel. So in order to do that, I'm just going to copy this right over here and put that right over there as well. So that this is what's going to execute right after we're done subscribing. So even if there was no message sent to the channel, I still want to see the previous channel log when I switch over to channel 1. And I know this might be a little confusing just as I'm explaining it, but when we see the demonstration, I think that will really tie everything together. The next thing I'm going to do is just copy this over and do the same thing for channel 2. I know that it's copying code and it's a lot of repetitive code here. And if we worked on it, we could probably refactor it so it was just one function. But since that's not the point of this demonstration, I'm just going to copy this all over and paste it right here under that. And now we just need to change all the 2's to 1's and the 1's to 2's. So I'm going to change this channel 1 to channel 2. And I'm going to change this to 1. And this one will be to channel 2. And here we're going to have message log 2. And this will also be message log 2. And this will also be message log 2. Okay, so now what should happen is that when we click on a channel, we're unsubscribing from our old resources, and we are subscribing to a new resource. And let me just double check to make sure that this makes sense. One more thing that I wanted to do is just change this text over here. So let's call this channel. And let's have this display the channel that we're on, just so that it's clear. So what I'm going to do is whenever we click here and our channel is finished switching over, let's just say channel text is equal to, for here it'll be channel 1. And for this one, it will be channel 2. Okay, so that should be pretty much what we need for this part of the demonstration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish our website, and we're going to head back over to our incognito windows to show you how it actually works. Okay, so moment of truth, let's check out our code. So I'm just going to put in names over here, Bob and Jane. And let's start messaging. So hi from Bob, and then hello from Jane. So we see that it's working as we expected. So we see our messages and the other person's messages, and they're persisting. And now let's see what happens if somebody moves to a channel. Okay, so Jane moves to channel 1. So, okay, so it's good. So we move to the channel, and now our message log is blank. And let's try sending a message to Bob. So let's say, hey. And this is not what was supposed to happen. Okay, so we see hey now in both of these message logs, and we kind of return to our old message log. And what was the expected behavior was that only Jane would see her message, but Bob would not, because Bob is not on channel 1. Okay, and that means that there's a problem with our code, and I can already tell you that it has to do with our backend code. So let's hop over and check out our backend code and see how we can fix this. Okay, so we're back here in our editor, and let's pop over to the backend code and see why this wasn't working. So right over here, we have our send message function, and we can already get rid of these consoles because we already know that this is working. But our issue is that you can see here that our messages get sent to the channel, and this channel doesn't specify a resource. And that means that every time that we're sending a message, we are sending it to anybody who's subscribed to the entire channel, which includes anybody who's subscribed to a specific resource. That means that within this channel here, for the send message, we need to specify a specific channel that we're sending to. And we could either do this in one of two ways. We could either keep our send message function as is and build another one which is specifically for sending to channels. And when I say channels, I mean resources. Or I can just leave this as is and change this one to be more specific, which is what I'm going to do. So what we're going to do is when we pass in this message data, we're going to pass in another parameter, which is going to be our resource ID. Okay, and then here within our channel, we're going to have name, and we're also going to have resource ID, which is going to be the resource ID. Okay, and now let's head over back to our front end and see how we're implementing the send message function. So we are sending a message here in the send button, and we're passing in the message data. So we're going to need another way to know which channel we're on so that we can pass it when we send the message. And in order to do that, I'm going to create another variable up here, and let's just call that channel. And when I subscribe to a specific channel, I'm going to change this variable. So let's go down to our channel subscriptions. And here, first thing I'm going to do is just say channel equals channel 1. Okay, and I'm going to add the same line of code when we subscribe to channel 2 and just change it to channel 2. And I'm going to publish our code. And we're going to head back over to our incognito windows and check it out. Okay, so now we're back at our incognito windows, and let's test out the code that we wrote. So I'm just going to get back to Bob and Jane over here. And we can see that our regular messaging board is working as expected. Hi appears on both sides. Hello, and that appears for everyone because we haven't selected a channel yet. But if, for example, Jane goes to channel 1, so we see we move to channel 1 and the message log clears. And now Jane says, "Are you here?" and sends that to channel 1. So we see that appears for Jane, but not for Bob, because Bob is not on channel 1. And if Bob goes to channel 2 and says, "Where are you?" and sends it to channel 2, then only Bob will see it in channel 2 and Jane won't see it in channel 1. But if Jane and Bob are both on the same channel, then we can say, "I'm here," and send it, and then we see that it appears for both. You see here that Bob's previous message does not appear for Jane because we weren't persisting this data in any way. We weren't saving it to a collection. We weren't saving it to a database. If we wanted somebody who joins a channel to see past messages, we would need to save them to a collection and load them. And that's really a Wix data problem. It's not a Wix real-time problem. That's why I didn't deal with it here in this tutorial. But if you wanted to do that, that's how you would approach it. So this is really how you build a simple messaging board using Wix Realtime. And the main goal here was to give you the tools that you need to build other cool projects with Realtime, whether it's different notifications or alerts or keeping track of online status or stuff like that. And I'm very curious to hear what you're building. So please kind of leave comments, and also if you have any questions. If you like this redo of the video, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe because we're going to have more cool videos like this later on. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.